Amazing. Well, starting. So, hi, welcome everyone to Savvy Ladies, our family finances, our third session of our workshops. Really thrilled to have our wonderful, wonderful volunteers here. We have Chris Blakely joining us today. She is a CFP and she also works on our Savvy Ladies free financial helpline, which you all know is open to each and every one of you to utilize as a resource to answer your financial question. That is a personal question. If it's not answered here today, at any time, come to the free financial helpline. So please use that resource, share it as well. And also back again is Shannon Paul. Ms. Shannon Paul, we're thrilled that you are here. You are just a lifesaver and a ray of sunshine and really have been outstanding through these workshops. And we will do more, everyone. So please, this is the first of a series and we will continue to bring you more programming like this. So stay tuned. It's 1:02. Time is precious. So let's get started.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us as we've gone through this. I've been very grateful to be able to help frame these conversations for everyone. And we are today joined, just to remind you who I am, and then we'll give our good friend Chris a chance to introduce themselves as well. And so I am Miss Shannon. I am a solopreneur, and I live in the Twin Cities here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, with my adorable, and I'm using that word because I need to use it often to remind myself, my adorable 16-year-old son, who happens to also be high supports on the autism spectrum. So, like many of you, I'm doing the single mom thing, I'm doing the solopreneur thing. I'm very fortunate that I've also been the co host of a show called the Financial Health and Wealth Show with my friend Cassandra Brazier from Avila Wealth for the last 8 years. And to be able to learn and work with her. And also, consider myself a DIY personal finances person because, like many of you, it wasn't modeled for me when I was a kid. And my mom did the Lord's work and worked really hard, but we were in that cycle of living paycheck to paycheck, and that cycle of just that mid-level poverty, kind of thing. And so it really took a lot of work and self-education and even just a mental shift for me to go, I'm going to do something different. And as I've mentioned before, for me, it was when I was in college, just having that moment of clarity of this can't be impossible. I should be able to learn about these things and I deserve to learn about it. So for me personally, the first thing I did is I picked up a Susie Orman book. I'd seen her on a talk show. I was like, okay, she seems cool. She used language that I understood. And so I went out and I bought her book, Young, Broke, and Fabulous, and read that. And not everything applied to it in there. I wasn't able to take every step that she took or use every suggestion that she had, but it was a starting point for me. And it was more education than I had received, growing up. And so we are encouraging you to continue to go wherever you are. We have organizations like Savvy Ladies that will meet you there and also encourage you to go. We met you here, but you deserve to make those next steps and to be financially secure, to be financially literate. And thank you very much for joining us because you're doing a great thing for yourself being here today. And hopefully, as we have this conversation today about the conversation of generational wealth, it'll not only do a great thing for you, but do a great thing for your family. So that's who I am. I'm going to help moderate today and frame the conversation for everybody that's joining us. And so I have had the opportunity to get to know Chris Blakely a little bit this morning, but I'm excited for Chris to go ahead and share your story and how you got involved with Savvy Ladies.
Sure. Thank you so much, Shannon. Hello, everybody. I'm Chris Blakely, and I am a volunteer with Savvy Ladies. I'm also a certified financial planner and I have my own business. I was letting Shannon and Judy know that I had spent many, many years working in corporate finance for Nationwide Insurance. So I come with a lot of interesting backgrounds. I'm like Shannon in my growing up space. My parents weren't college educated. They didn't know a lot about finances. My dad was in the military. We moved around a lot, paycheck to paycheck also. And, when I was lucky enough, I was able to go to college. My undergrad was actually in chemical engineering. So it actually had nothing to do with business or finance. In fact, they don't require you to take any finance classes to get that degree. So when I got out of college, I had an actual college degree and absolutely no knowledge of finances or how to spend money or save money, nothing. In fact, I will share a kind of embarrassing now secret, but I didn't even know what a mutual fund was. I remember I couldn't even believe had gone through school, I'd done all these things. And I kept thinking, I don't understand what that is. And just like Shannon, I went to the library and I got a book called Finance for Dummies. This was like a new series of books, those yellow books you guys have seen. Those were new back in the day when I came up, and I just went and got it and I read it cover to cover, and it was amazing. It was so eye-opening. I knew nothing. I remember when I got my first job and going through HR, and they asked me, how much did I want to put in my 401k? Another completely confusing thing to me because I didn't know what that was. And so I remember the lady in HR said, you should at least contribute what they match. And
Right.
okay, do that then, so but reading my For Dummies book, what I learned is you try and max that out as young as you as possibly can, whatever you can do. And that has the biggest bang for the buck, right? So the younger you are when you start this, the less you have to carry to get across the finish line of maybe wherever your goals might be. But oh yes, Shannon, go ahead.
And Chris, I was going to say one of the things I think is fantastic, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I have a similar embarrassing story. One of my first jobs is I used to work for Norwest Bank, and that no longer exists. It absorbed Wells Fargo and now took on the personality of Wells Fargo. But I had a job working at Norwest Bank, and I started working in their phone bank. And so it was my first job, same thing, where I'm like, oh, wait, I can do a 401k. And I technically had gotten, and then eventually I got to the point where I even had like stock options, had no idea how any of that worked. And didn't really, same thing that you said, Chris. Okay, put into what they match. But there wasn't an educational process about it, even for us working at financial institutions or financial adjacent institutions. It was still, I remember looking at that list of all the different things you could do in your 401k and kind of picking the same way I pick teams during March Madness, kind of like, well, the time, I don't know what all these gobbledygook of letters mean, but I'm going, well, I'm doing something. And then sometimes I would move stuff around based on what seemed like it was doing well, but it was still, I wasn't doing anything with intention. I was just doing.
Right.
And that's a lot of the conversations that hopefully we are having for everybody that's joining in, is going, if you don't know these things, you didn't do anything wrong. There's not often a place organically in your life where it says, I'm going to work on my financial literacy. It's
Right.
just, we don't, even bits and pieces of that conversation that you might learn about. Maybe, you had a certain class in high school that maybe talked about overall economics, but we don't have a lot of that information anymore. So it's great that there are organizations like Savvy Ladies that goes, nope, you're correct that nobody taught you this. You're in the right place, because a lot of this information wasn't presented, and specific, in general, also wasn't presented to women.
Right.
So yeah, so Chris is an anomaly and a wonderful unicorn, that you are a certified financial planner, as a woman as well. So thank you for being in this situation and doing all of the work that you needed to do to get that certification.
Yes, no, thank you, Shannon. And you make a really great point there. Historically, have not been a lot of women or people of color at all in this business, and that is starting to really change. I'm part of the CFP board, the Certified Financial Planning Board, and we've just been getting some great statistics recently of the number of women and people of color that have really joined up and gone through this certification, and so that they can more adequately help folks that would feel more comfortable with somebody that might have a different dynamic. And I think it's wonderful, because I feel like that with doctors too sometimes.
Right.
And why wouldn't you feel that way about your money? These things are all very important things in our lives, that where we need to have somebody that we feel comfortable, that we can share with and
Right.
to our goals. So yeah, so as I kind of progressed along through my journey, another thing that I found was highly educated people, I use my own example, don't always know this either. So
Mhm.
I always encourage people not to feel like you're out in the cold. Like I said, I worked in corporate finance for Nationwide Insurance, a really big insurance company. And I will say the vast majority of people I worked with didn't understand personal finance either.
Mhm.
They might have understood finance, which is a
Right.
different thing, corporate finance, than personal finance. Personal finance is different. And there are so many people that really don't have a great grasp on it. And one of the things that is I work with folks through Savvy Ladies, and I have my own business, and what I try and tell folks, it's a very mental game too.
Right.
Sometimes people think of it as this hard science, right? Like, well, I don't understand how a stock works or a bond, or and these things can seem really technical, but a lot of what makes you successful in your personal finance is really up in your head.
Yes.
You kind of have to get out of your way, if that makes sense sometimes,
Right.
as you progress through your journey. And I know you guys in the different sessions that you've had have been learning about budgeting. And I know you learned, I think in the last session, about family finances and how that can be very personal and very mental,
Yes, and
emotional.
challenging. Mhm.
Yes, very challenging. And the emotions that go behind that. I work with a organization. I should have mentioned I live in Columbus, Ohio, or it's called Westerville, but it's easier to say Columbus because nobody's ever heard of Westerville. But
Right.
anyway, I have clients here. I work with a nonprofit here called Families Flourish, and we help single moms with school age kids move from the inner city to the suburbs
Mhm.
and get in affordable housing. And so I end up talking with a lot of folks about how to really change up the dynamic of where they came from and where they want to go to. And a lot of it starts with goals. And I
Right.
have a couple slides. I'll go ahead and bring these up. Shannon, did you want to weigh in on anything we just talked about, especially around the emotional and behavioral? And
Right. And
yeah.
that'd be great as Chris brings up their slides. And for everyone out there, as we're framing this conversation about generational wealth, one of the things that came to mind for me first when we start talking about this is freeing yourself to go, you are allowed to think about doing better not only for yourself but doing better for the next generation. And sometimes I think, as far as what Chris was saying with that mental piece of it, is that we get stuck in this thing of being humbled to the point of our own self-detriment, where it is, this great accomplishment to be able to do well with very little. So that is fantastic, and you should be proud if you're doing that. But it's also not a bad thing to do well. And I think sometimes we are raised, as far as what Chris was saying about getting out of your own way, we're just accustomed to this mentality of, well, it's greedy to want to be able to do these things. It's a bad thing to want and to have these things. And you also have this, as someone mentioned it to me, this misguided sense of pride by not having things. And it's a good defense mechanism, because you don't want to be we as human beings don't want to live in a land of disappointment. And if you start setting some of these mentalities, then you go, but if I don't get it, I'll feel bad. And so instead, a lot of what we wanted to do in this series, and also what we'll do today, is going, no, freeing yourself up to go, you do deserve to do well, and you can do there. And wherever you are, there's another step, a small step, another step that you can take to go, I did the next right thing. I'm going to get there. I'm allowed to set these goals, and I'm allowed to dream. As we said before, like, you're allowed to dream and go, what would it look like if I had this kind of security, this type of resources, and I was able to do these type of things? You deserve to be in to live in that world where your dreams can be your reality. As we'll cover today, though, there may be some homework involved in accomplishing those dreams, but you're allowed to go, I can figure out a path to getting there.
Yep. Yep, that is actually it. And so you can see, I brought up a slide here. It's just how I like to think about, the journey that you go on, especially when you're just starting out. I know when I got out of college, all I had was some debt and,
Yeah.
and now a job where I was going to get a paycheck. So that was my first step up, right? So for me, thinking about what is it I want to accomplish, and sometimes you don't necessarily know all of it right at the beginning, and that's okay. That's okay.
Right.
Set the first goal. What is the first goal? Just something I want to work towards. And for a lot of people, sometimes that's I want to establish emergency savings. I'm
Mhm.
tired of having something go wrong with my car and I can't replace it, or I can't fix it right away, or I have to go in debt to fix it. It's a wonderful thing to be able to try as much as possible to get out of what I call bad debt. There's some
Yeah.
debt that's fine. But the bad debt is the things that we really don't want to have because they're going to hinder our progress. So you think about getting those first goals established, you think about getting your debt and credit under control. Then you move into savings and budgeting, which I know you guys have been talking about. And then when you really want to get into wealth building, that's where you get into the investment protection side of things. And we're going to talk more about that as we progress through here. Um, I'll tell you, this is some of the things that I've learned, secrets of the wealthy. And this is definitely slow and steady wins the race. I have that down at the very bottom here, but just being really clear about the things that you want to achieve and developing a plan. I know you guys have heard the stats that if you say you're going to do something and you say it out loud or you write it down, you're more likely to do it. And it's very true. The best day to start any of these plans is just today.
Mhm.
I always say tomorrow will never come because if I get in this habit of saying, well, tomorrow I'm going to eat better, or or tomorrow, I'm going to go out and work in the yard. It never comes. It just doesn't for me. So today is the best day to do anything.
Right.
And I love saying that when I'm in a group of folks that are in their 20s and a group of folks that are in their 50s. It's like, no matter what it is you need to accomplish or wherever you want to get, today's the best day to start.
Right. And one of the things that I also want to remind people is if you have any questions as we go, you can feel free to put them in the chat and we'll try and make sure that we have all of those into the room as we go. I don't want anyone to think that they have to save it until the end. If Chris, as we're going along, says something that really resonates with you or you'd like to unspool just a little bit, feel free to put that in the chat and we'll go ahead and make sure that we cover it as we go.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Shannon. I meant to say that too and totally forgot.
Right.
If you're like me, you can't hold a question too long or it's gone.
No. Yeah, agreed. It'll flitter away. I agree with
It'll
you.
be gone.
And I agree with what you just said as well as far as starting today and when I'm one of those people, I've mentioned it before. I like to gamify things. So most of my budgeting is on software and apps and things that I can kind of just pull up on my phone because that works for me. But as far as my financial goals, that was something that I'm like, I picked a number and I said, this is what I will be making in 2025. And then I wrote post-it. I put it on car. I ripped up a bunch of pieces of paper
Mhm.
and I wrote these notes and I put them in certain important places throughout my home. And then I put one in my car and said that these are the places that I will anchor my goal of doing this. And one of the things that we've mentioned before about goal setting is that you don't have to know how you're going to get to this goal when you set it. Sometimes it's set the goal, make sure that it's, a proper goal. And we can go and you can look at some of the previous sessions that talked about setting that goal, but then put it someplace and put it so that you can go, no, it's going to stay as top of mind because as Chris said, otherwise the day will never come when you start working towards it. So if you go, I'm waiting to set that goal until I know all of the cobblestones along the path to get to that final destination, then it's very difficult to actually start because you're like, well, there's always going to be something that's missing and you won't know how to get to that end goal. But you can start with, well, I do know how to take this step. So I'll just do that first.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Shannon. That's great wisdom. The number 3 one is, to me, the absolute biggest key to really wealth building for your future is just living below your means. Avoid that lifestyle inflation. The story I told you when I met with HR and they were like, well, just start with the match, right? Which is what they put me in. After I read my For Dummies book and I learned that the more I could put in, the younger I was, what I did is every time I got a raise, I raised that amount that I contributed so that I didn't get used to that money. Now I know that can be hard with inflation, especially recently, that can be hard. But the more you can do it, the better. So before you get used to that raise, before you get used to that new job, that promotion, that whatever, give yourself a raise first so that you keep creeping up. And then eventually you'll be shocked. You'll suddenly be contributing the max and you won't even remember how you got there. And it'll be amazing. So just living below your means is very, very powerful. I can tell you, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that book, The Millionaire Next Door. I've not read it, but I know the premise of it is that you can be living around people that don't look like they're rich and they are.
Right.
And I can guarantee you my neighbors will never think I'm rich. I drive a 10-year-old car and I will get as much out of it as I can. It's just how I'm wired. In fact, I find it a source of pride that my my last car was 14 years old and it had 330,000 miles on it. And I loved it. It was a Honda Civic, if you want to know. So, but you know, that to me is the things that I value, because that's actually not what I value as a car. I value having money in the bank and being able to be, you know, for me, my end goal was I wanted to be able to retire when I wanted to retire. I wanted to be able to leave if I wanted to leave and focus on something else. And, you know, I, like Shannon, have a teenage son. He's 15. And these couple years that I have left before he goes off to college are right now the most precious commodity I have. So, you know, so I want to have that time. I don't work at Nationwide anymore for that specific reason, because I wanted to have more time with him before he's gone. Then I can do something else.
The other thing I wanted to say real quick before you move on, Chris, is as far as living below your means, that's for me, like when I was still like, you know, when I was in college and it was still like, you know, I'm mom 2.0 in my family. We talked about this in family finances. So I have two younger sisters who are like 12 and 15 or 16 years younger than I am. So my mom, you know, was, when she was working, I was watching them. And then when I started working, I was helping take care of the family. So that concept of living below my means when I was paycheck to paycheck was really difficult at the time. And so it really was back to where we're saying start where you were. I started with like $5 and I was just putting it away. And I'm just like, and at first it felt dumb. I'm like, I'm going to use that word because as I'm going, what I'm like, what am I doing? It's like $5. It's not going to make a difference. But then when I finally like got in the habit and looked up one day and I had that first $500 put away, that was a huge win for me. Because I could remember like never having money in a savings account, like never. It just wasn't a thing I ever had. It was money went in, I paid bills, money went out. And sometimes money went out faster than I made it. Like I was waiting to pay a bill. And so making that decision of, I'm just going to try, I'm going to put it in and try and see how it goes was really difficult. So I understand if you're feeling continually behind, it's hard to find that money to do that sometimes, but you can figure out how to do that. So Chris, as you continue to go on, we do have a couple of questions in the chat that I'll sprinkle in as we go.
Okay. Sure. Just let me know, Shannon, when it's a good stopping point for that. So, you know, I talk about continuous learning. You know, you've heard Shannon and I coming from simple means and just wanting to learn for ourselves. I'm always kind of the type, I really like to know things for myself. I don't want to have to always trust just what other people tell me. I just want to do my own research and make sure I know how things work. You know, making your money work for you. You know, today you can get a high yield savings account that's going to earn you 4.5% or sometimes more, sometimes, but around that amount. That's crazy. I mean, just a few years ago, you couldn't get more than 0.5%, you know, so, you know, some things are just shop around. I mean, I know Judy and I were talking about this the other day, and she said that, so she wanted me to make sure I brought that up to you guys, is shop around, because there can be really good rates out there that are available to everybody.
Chris, that kind of lends into one of the questions that we do have in the chat. So thank you for putting this in there. And Janine, I do see your question about your 401(b). Well, your 403(b). We'll come to that in a moment. But this was someone did ask Chris, could you provide tips on automated investing? And so it seems like a good place to put that question in based upon what you were just saying about shopping around. So what are your suggestions on finding options for automated investing, and what's your take on that?
Yeah. So, and I talk with Savvy Ladies clients all the time about this, especially folks that are struggling. They're living paycheck to paycheck. We'll run through and we'll do a budget over the phone or over Zoom or whatever. And what we'll learn is that they should have $50 left over every month, $100 left over. Sometimes it can be hundreds and hundreds of dollars that should be left over, but they don't feel that. And a lot of times, you know, we talk about that. Well, what's driving that is probably things that are unexpected, right? So when we put together a budget, a lot of times we think about those things that we have to spend money on: rent and groceries and utilities and gas for the car and whatever. But then every now and then we have to go buy a shirt, right? Or shoes or whatever. And so sometimes those monies can be taken up. what I tell folks is, if you are able to do this, go to your HR department. If you're on direct deposit, see if they will split your paycheck, right? So they will direct deposit your money into your account that you live out of, right? Then they'll take a little portion, maybe it's 20 bucks, maybe it's 10 bucks, maybe it's 100 bucks, whatever you think you might be able to do, they will direct that to a different bank account. Put some friction on that bank account. What I mean by that is, don't link it up on your phone. Okay. Make it a little bit hard to have to go in and look at that money, meaning, oh, I got to wait till I get home because I got to get my password and, out, and I've got to log in there because I don't have that readily available on my phone, because you don't want to have ready access to it, right? You can link it up to your living account and transfer money as needed. That's easy to do, but you don't necessarily want to be looking at this account all the time. And I tell folks, put that money in a money market account. I use Ally Bank, ALLY, but there's lots of them out there. There's lots of great banks, CIT Bank, Synchronicity Bank. I mean,
Mine's at Synchronicity,
Synchrony
now.
I forget. Yeah, bank. Those are great ones. And just do your research and find out that they're a money market account. You're going to find out they're earning over 4% today, and make that your account. And then have your HR department direct a portion of your check over there that you can live with it going to an account. It'll start building up. Don't go look at it. Make a pact with yourself. I'm not going to look at that. That's one way. Another way, and actually I just met with a Savvy Lady client this morning, and we set up a Roth IRA for her through Vanguard. And then she linked that to her bank account. And as soon as she starts building up a little cushion of emergency savings, then we're going to start peeling off maybe 10 bucks a month to go into her Roth IRA, and it's going to start building up and getting invested. So there are lots of ways that you can automate things like that. And the trick is, it's this mental trick. You're tricking your brain to not even think about that money because it's over here. It's over here in this place that I don't go look and I don't see it. And then, I need a new tire for my car. And I have $600 I didn't think about, and I can actually pay for the tire without.
I put it in I had started mine originally in a whole different credit union so again, it wasn't connected. It was just putting a little bit over there. And then, when I got to the next year and I was doing my taxes, I was like, oh, wait, you did that. So I do encourage everybody to remember, once you're successful at it, like, don't look at it on a regular basis, but if you get good at it and you've done it for a year, bump it up. Like, just pick something. Like, I just was like, if me at the time, I'm like, I just added another $25 a month. It wasn't even a lot, kind of thing at the time, because I was still like, it still like felt weird. Like, oh, I'm going to need it, because I was so used to starting and then having to drain that account, that once I got some of that momentum, it still didn't feel, I'm going to use air quotes for everybody, it didn't feel real, because I was so accustomed to something always happens and I never can save. And it really did go, nope. It took training and it did take some time. So if it feels like, like you said, that patience and that persistence, Chris, none of these things are overnight.
No,
it's not overnight.
They are not. And Shannon, I'm so glad you said what you said, because, and I hope if you're sitting there on this call and you're looking at Shannon and I, and you're like, gosh, they made it, right? Like, maybe you're saying that. I don't know if you're
right. Maybe we're like, thank you for believing that. Is not.
Yeah, thank you for believing that. Exactly. Yeah. But the hard work it took to get to where there is money in the bank when you need it for an emergency, and there is money for retirement. And, if you're going to save for your child's, college education, or whatever it is that are important goals for you. The way to get there is, it's changing the mindset. Because I can tell you, when I was in college, I wasn't like necessarily a big spender, but if I needed something, I didn't think about it. I put it on the credit card. And then when I graduated and I'm like, oh, I got this credit card debt, it didn't feel good, but I'm like, it is what it is. I mean, that's how my parents live. You always have credit card debt, right? I mean, that's what you have. I mean, that was the mindset. And as time went on, and just like Shannon, continuing to bump up that savings, bump up that retirement. Every time you have a little bit of extra money, put a little bit more in. And all of a sudden, it's like, well, now I don't want to see that money go away. And your mind starts to shift like, no, I don't think I'm going to go buy that, because I don't want to lose. I like having this nest egg. I like having this little cushion that I don't have to worry as much as I used to, because those days still seem really fresh to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. And just so much of what we're covering is, again, about the mindset. Like, when I talk to friends, like, getting out of the trap that getting a tax refund is a windfall. It's like, that's not a windfall. That's your money that they were doing nothing with that benefited you.
Yeah.
You know, and so just going, well, I'm not living towards that. I'm living towards paying an appropriate amount of taxes so they don't come and yell at me. But also, as you know, one of your next points, Chris, about continuous learning, that was something that I'm going, no, that's not the best way to save. Like when, you know, I was one of those people, and now when people say it to me about, oh, well, that way I'll know I'll have that money. And I was treating my tax refund like a savings account and then going, no, that's not a savings account because I'm not gaining any interest on it. I'm not getting anything. It's lazy money. When instead I can figure out a way of going, I'll be a better steward of that money, regardless of what that amount is. So I need to figure out how to keep that
Yeah, exactly.
$500, $1,200, whatever it is, versus giving it to them. With this is a specific question that I think that some of our specific, it's very specific to Janine, who's just entering the room again as well. Janine, we're gonna come to your question, but I also think that this might be something that Chris and Judy, our experts, might want to follow with them specifically, because it's talking about their 403b. And since they got their 403b, they had stopped contributing to their IRA, and that it's trying to figure out how they should split money between these accounts. So I think that that's something that they'll want to cover specifically with one of their advisors. But in general, how when you're helping people prioritize, Chris, of where the funds should go, if they have, you know, back to what you're saying about living below their means, if they're like, hey, I'm going to get a raise, like Janine. So congratulations, Janine. If they're going to get a raise, if something comes through where they got an inheritance or something happened,
Yeah.
how do you help people prioritize where those funds should go?
Yeah, so some of that it is somewhat scriptive, because the first thing you're always going to want to do is make sure you get the maximum of a match. So if your employer does do some sort of match in a 403b, 457, 401k, those accounts are all very similar, just through different types of employers. Make sure you're getting your match first, because that's free money. You don't want to leave any of that on the table. That's an easy one. The second one I like to push people towards, because it's really good, especially if you're in a lower income tax bracket, is the Roth IRA or a Roth 401k or a Roth 457. I mean, most of these retirement plans nowadays are starting to get the Roth version of your pre-tax plan. Like, so no longer pre-tax, but after tax. That's what Roth means, after tax. So you're no longer getting a tax break today, but you're going to put in this after tax money. It's going to grow tax free. And then someday in the future, when you retire, you take that money out, it's all tax free. Even the earnings, what you earned on it's tax free. You'll never pay tax on the earnings. And the nice thing about the Roth money is you never have to take it out. So Shannon and I were just talking about RMDs, or required minimum distributions. When you reach a certain age, and of course, by the time probably all of us on the call get there, it'll be 75. You're going to have to start taking money out of a pre-tax account. And so, yeah, you got a tax break back in the day, but now the tax man's come to collect his money, and they're going to make you take that out. And so think about this just for a minute. If you're 75 at that time, and that's assuming it doesn't keep getting pushed out, and then you think about life expectancy of 85, it's like 10 years you're going to have to take that money out. You could be taking out an awful lot of money if you've done well and you've built up that next egg. Let's say you built it up to, $500,000 or something like that. Like, you're going to have to start taking out, 50,000 a year for that 10-year period of time. It could be a lot if you combine that with your Social Security, or if you get a pension from a job, something like that. I know that's less likely nowadays, but it can still happen. So those types of things, or if you bought into an annuity, anything like that, those things are going to start adding up. And then suddenly you're going to be like, I'm not in a lower tax bracket like I thought.
Right.
And that can happen, especially if you start becoming successful at meeting your goals. Then those things can kind of almost work against you in a way. But I mean, it's always good to save, but that Roth savings can be very impactful for folks.
Right. So as we're continuing to go through your checklist here, we're about halfway through, Chris, our time that we have with all of our friends that are here. So I just wanted to mention that, because there's a lot of information that we wanted to cover as we're continuing to get people to plan for their future.
Yeah. And so, the next items on here, probably not any surprise to you. try and find multiple sources of income, clean up your debt. Those are sometimes obvious, not always easy to do.
Right.
This part, it sounds like, Shannon, you guys covered this in terms of getting real about what really matters to you. And sometimes what really matters to you can be a want.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it isn't. And I think Shannon just, was alluding to that earlier. It can be that those things are important to you. Just make sure you're being real about that, and that the things that are wants really, really do matter, because it's really helpful for your mind to be thinking about it like, okay, I could buy a Civic, right, and drive it for 330,000 miles, or I could get this nicer car, and trade it in every so often on a lease or something like that, because I always want to have a nicer car. I don't want to have to worry about, my car breaking down or whatever, something like that, right? So those things, just understanding the trade-off, because if you get the Civic and you drive it till it's in the ground, yeah, you did save money. I mean, right? So it just, things are trade-offs. And so thinking about them that way. And I'll give you a good example. I had a Savvy Ladies client I worked with last week, and we were going through her budget. And we were talking about, she was 21 years old, so really young, just starting out. And she was asking about, well, I can't save much because, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. And there's absolutely no judgment to this. I'm not saying it. I hope nobody takes that away, but she was paying $130 a month to do tanning. It was like an unlimited tanning. And I said to her, I said, that could be very important to you, something that matters to you. It could be a health wellness thing. I don't think of it that way, but like she might,
Right.
or it's very meditative to her. I don't know. But all I'm saying is I ran some numbers for her, and I told her, I said, when she's 65, that could have grown to $400,000. So if her 21-year-old self looks at her 65-year-old self, what would they think, right? So 65-year-old self looks back and says, why didn't you just put that $130 a month in, and I would today be retiring, right? I would have this nest egg and I'd be retiring, right? So it's these trade-offs of what really is important. And, that $130 today really could be something in the future, right?
And Judy and Chris, I'm going to share an article that really does take place that, because it was an article that I don't have in front of me, but it was talking about a study that was done that talked about the way that we view future self. So future Shannon is the same way you view a stranger. So making a decision about something that will benefit you when you're 60. So if anybody's out there going, well, I can't think that way. There's a reason your brain does see future you as a stranger. And so it does it back to what Chris started with as a mind shift, is going, no, I am doing myself a favor and looking at future you as current you, the same thing. Like, so, and it goes across not only just your finances, but it goes your finances, your health, all of these things, where we know it's a difficult mind shift to go, 60-year-old me will appreciate the fact that I'm doing this now. So we get it.
Right. Absolutely. And I was going to say, and to Shannon's point about gamifying, and I find this so much fun in gaming, and my 15-year-old son does now too, because I actually bought him into a Roth IRA this last year for the first time. So he's been totally all about this. But there's a website. There's a lot of them, by the way. If you just Googled 401k calculator or IRA calculator or whatever, I like the one that's at www.calculator.net. That's one of my favorites. I think it's very clean and simple. You can put in your current age, how much you have saved, how much you plan to save every month, when you want to know how much it'll be worth, and then what you think you'll earn in say the stock market. And I would always put in something like 7% to be a little bit conservative, right? So if you invest in the stock market, and you do that from the time you're 30 or 40 or whatever, and then you put in a year like 65, when I'm 65, it'll tell you how much this investment is going to be by that time period. So I find that, to me, like a fun game. I love, every now and then I'll just go put, where I'm at today and how many more years do I have, and how much am I going to have? Like, it's just a lot of fun, right? And my son absolutely goes bananas if I keep putting this much money in, and it's fun to see his face light up over it. So, to Shannon's point about doing this for the next generation and the next, not just yourself, it's getting them excited about what they could be doing with the money they might save in the future. I make him save 50% of everything he gets. So even if it's birthday money, I know, mean mom, but it's kind of funny, when I first started making him do this, he was like, bummed, like, man, I just got this money and now you're making me take half of it and blah, 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 whatever, but then when I take him to the bank and he had his money to give to the bank teller, he loved that. And now that he's 15, he's really happy because he can look at the Nerf gun that's broken in the corner of the basement and think, I probably would have bought another one of those if you hadn't made me save it, so it's kind of funny. But
and then I have to trick myself into doing that too. I have one of those calculators that whatever my goal is, where if I want to buy something new, I'm like, how much do you want it this much? And so sometimes it doesn't make me go, I don't want it, but it's like, I'll wait till it costs X. I'm like, do I need it today? I'll wait until it's on sale. I specifically do that. Thank you, Carla. I specifically do that because if I see like because ads are always following us around the internet. So if some cute dress is following me around the internet or some cute shoes, I go, do I need it for that price? And sometimes I'll wait. And then I'm like, okay. And then it'll drop a price or it'll go on sale. I'm like, okay, for that, I'll get it. And so that's just really how it is. It's just giving yourself the latitude of going, as Chris said, this want might be something that's important to you for a variety of reasons, but do you need it? How do you transfer it into that you need it at this price, or can you just wait? And then sometimes you wait and I'm like, no, I wanted something else instead. And so that's come up before too. So we appreciate you being able to do that. And once you start dreaming and setting those goals, it'll help you prioritize a lot of those wants that you have as well.
Very much so. And it sounds like, Shannon, I apologize since I wasn't in your earlier sessions, you guys already covered goals, it sounds like.
We did cover this and we did talk about some of these SMART goals, but it's always good to just kind of remind people why we're doing this and how goal setting is of value in doing that. So yes, so thank you for sharing that again.
Okay. So you guys will remember this and you can always look it up. This is very common, Googleable, if that's a word stuff. So here's one of my favorite slides. So we talked a little bit about this, but I just want to set up two scenarios for you, right? So in the first scenario, you see that little red arrow bar, the person's only going to save for 10 years, but they're going to start at 22 and they're going to put in about 417. I came up with that number, I think, off of what you could invest in an IRA in the year I created the slide. But so they start putting that in at age 22, they stop at age 32, and they retire at 65. So they only put money in for those 10 years and never again. The next scenario, the person waits 15 years until they're 37, then they start putting the same amount of money in and they have to put it in all 28 years until they're 65. And so I know you guys know I've set you up here, but which person's going to have the most money at 65? Correct. The person who starts the earliest will have the most money. You can see the difference here. At 65, they have basically 1.5 million. The person in scenario number 2 has about 900,000. So they've got 650,000 more dollars saved because they started earlier, and they only put in 82,000 of their own money to get 1.5. Doesn't that sound insane? They only put in 82,000 of their own money to get 1.5. That's like buying lottery tickets in a way, sort of.
Sort of.
Yeah. Then you get to scenario 2, and to get that 900,000, they had to put in, my camera's blocking it, almost 300,000. So you get the point here. The earlier you can start, the better. And if you're trying to think about like, oh, okay, well, I'm this age, so it doesn't matter. Go back to the first slide. Today's the best day to start.
Right.
No matter what.
Yeah, don't give up just because you're previous you hadn't started a thing. It's still starting now, wherever you are, it's still better than never starting at all.
Right. Absolutely. And of course, I'm sure you guys are very aware of the different options you have, because if you're working for an employer that offers these types of options, that's common for folks to understand that there are employer plans if they work for an employer that offers it, right? And again, we talked about just make sure you're getting the match. Sometimes these plans will allow loans, and I say don't take them if you can avoid it, but sometimes it's a easier way to get a loan if you need it in a pinch, but better to have emergency savings. I'm just bringing it up because it can be an option. I will tell you, it's the way I got out of my credit card debt from college, because by the time I read my For Dummies book, I already had a little bit built up in my 401k. I did take a loan, paid off my credit card. And then from there, I've never had credit card debt since. And as soon as I paid that loan off, I've never taken a loan again. Right. So I'm just saying it can help sometimes. So other options outside employer plans, and this is something I would say not everybody is always aware of these options. If you don't have an employer that allows you a 401k or offers that or whatever, you can always get an IRA. Anybody can get an IRA. I even helped a client this morning, not a US citizen, and she was able to open up a Roth IRA. So, and these can be offered through different types of firms, Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab. They have options for pre-tax or Roth. I would tell folks go Roth, especially if you're in a low tax bracket. Always go Roth. It's better option. Health savings accounts. This is the absolute best account, but not everyone has access to it. You have to have a high deductible health insurance plan to get this HSA, but then you can open it and it's a triple tax threat. So you get the tax break going in. So your pre-tax money going in, it earns tax-free. And when you withdraw it, if you withdraw it to pay for medical expenses, it's tax-free. So the other interesting thing about an HSA that people don't know, if you have one, you can save your bills now, let that HSA grow because you want it to just grow. You really don't want to use it now. You want it to grow for retirement, save your bills. And when you turn 65 and you start spending out of it, you could bring up a bill from 30 years ago, turn it in, and they'll reimburse you. Keep the right documentation, okay? Because you know how that works when you try and turn something in for an FSA or an HSA. They want the bill to look a certain way. So you have to follow those same rules. But it's an interesting thing about it. Were you going to say something, Shannon?
No, I did.
Okay.
You finish your conversation about the brokerage account,
Okay.
and then I'll drop in what I was going to say.
Okay, sorry, I thought I heard you trying to break in.
No, you're great. Yeah.
Okay. And then a brokerage account would be like you've maxed out your IRA or your 401k and IRA because you can contribute to both. And you're looking for now what? Now where do I put money? A brokerage, so a taxable account. Brokerage account is the next best place, and it'll get invested the same way. Mutual funds, exchange traded funds. You can invest in actual stocks, although I don't tend to recommend that for folks because it's very volatile. And you have to watch it really closely. I do get clients from time to time that think they're missing out on something if they're not invested in stocks. And I'll tell them, like, your best bet is really to go the low cost index funds first for your core investments for retirement. You really don't want to get into this watching stocks and having to be on top of it. You'll never know the things that the people making money off stocks know. You just
And can
won't.
I also say that FOMO, that fear of missing out, that FOMO is real. So not only in stocks, because you see a lot of those articles saying anybody in our new digital currencies, like our cryptos, and like feeling like that fear of missing out and jumping in. Um, I understand that it seems like, oh, I'm making a mistake or the world is moving on without me. So a lot of the information that you'll get from the savvy ladies and some of the other people are those more traditional. We know this is, you only can, we can't crystal ball what's going to happen with our American financial system. But there are some most likely to preserve your funds strategies that usually do not include too many volatile things like certain stocks and cryptocurrencies. So I like to see how things go. So I do have my stash account that I play with. That I also do have my Coinbase account that I play with, but those aren't my primary things. Those are if this money went away, what is still my stable core investment accounts and what am I doing for my future? But I get it that you want to kind of maybe see what's going on. And I'm like, yeah, I got my sheep, I got my thing. I got some of those things because I want to see how those things work. But it's never an amount of money that I'm going, dang it, that was going to be my kids,
Right.
future, kind of thing. But it
Right.
is. So once you get to the point that all of these financial stabilizing things are in place, then yeah, that might be something that you want to play with as well. So I do want to add in one more point. Before we go back to the chat, Chris, as you were talking about 401ks, if there's any other solopreneurs out there like me or small business owners, there are a lot of options now that you can talk to your financial advisors and financial planners about to get you back in the 401k world as a solopreneur and as a small business owner that weren't available years ago. So don't think that just because you don't work for a legacy employer that you can't do that anymore. It just needs to be. And I just encourage you to get that advice and have somebody talk you through to see if it's the right opportunity for you. But there are options for you. You don't have to go, oh, I'm a solopreneur now. I'm never going to have a 401k again. It might be an option for you as well. So that was what I was going to say, Chris. So
No,
feel
thank
free.
you,
I will hand
Shannon.
it back
That's
to
a
you.
really good point because I always try and target these discussions to folks that aren't business owners because generally that's who I'm talking to.
Mhm.
But Shannon makes a good point. Solo 401ks are extremely impactful, and there's other plans like that too. You can put in the employee and employer money. So
Mhm.
you can actually put in even more money than what a general person working for a corporation can put in. So
Yeah.
for good investments. This is another piece to like when you think about building generational wealth, sometimes these pieces come into play because now you've got a little bit of money, right? Like now you have enough money to really think about the things that matter and that you should be really honing in on for yourself. Disability insurance is one. Most people can get this through their employer. You can also buy a standalone disability policy. And it comes first on the list because it's the one that's most likely well, car and home, obviously, but between it and life insurance, it's the one that could be the most impactful for you because you're more likely to become disabled before you retire than you are to die. So most people don't know that. But the stats would prove that out that you're more likely to become disabled and need that type of insurance before you would need death insurance, right? So, and disability insurance can be fairly inexpensive. You know, I would definitely check that out if you have access to it through an employer. If not, you can look at a standalone policy. Life insurance is also similar. You know, for most people, you know, you want to at least have what they call a funeral policy, which would cover the funeral expenses. If you own a home, you generally want to have a life insurance policy that can cover paying off the home. If you have a child, you're worried about them going off to college, you want to make sure it can pay for college, those kind of things. I mean, when you think about life insurance, because I've talked to folks that are single, no kids, no house, no any, and they've got life insurance, and it's trying to help folks understand, you know, some that this kind of gets to sometimes with some financial advisors, they will sell you stuff, even if you maybe don't need it. So just keeping in mind what you need and where you need it and what you need to protect. You know, car, home, you should always, if you own a home, should have that. If you're a renter, you should have renter's insurance. They're pretty inexpensive. Renter's insurance is pretty inexpensive, and
Mhm.
it is worth it to have. Umbrella insurance is a liability insurance that's helpful to have, especially if you have a home. When you start building up some wealth, you generally do want to have umbrella insurance that at least equals your net worth. And net worth is just, here's all the things that I own that are value, my assets, and then I'm going to subtract any liabilities, which would be things I owe. That's my net worth. It's a very simple formula.
And if I can go to, we do have a couple of questions in the
Oh,
chat
sure.
that I want to make sure that we get to before we have to wrap today. So the first one is, and this one I see you, friend, because this is a conversation. So I'm curious to see what Chris says because I have a take on this one. Is it a huge impact to our financial situation if we are a 1099 versus W-2 employee? How much do we need to target to make as a 1099 to make up for all the tax savings we miss out on as a W-2 employee?
I'm not sure the tax savings comment
That's what I was
exactly.
gonna say.
I'm sorry. So you should generally, even if you're a 1099 employee, you should be paying the same tax rate. Let me say it
Mhm.
that way. So you've got your income, you've got your income tax, you've got to pay Social Security tax, and you've got to pay Medicare. So
Right.
those are generally the taxes that you have to pay. And you get charged that even as a W-2 employee.
Right.
Some of the differences might be, you know, like I live in a township in Ohio and we don't have income tax. So when I worked in Columbus downtown for Nationwide, I had to pay city tax. Now that I'm a 1099. I'm a self-employed person. I live in my township. I work out of my home. I don't have to pay that tax. I don't know if maybe that's what you might have meant.
Right. And the only other thing I could think of is maybe they also mean since I don't have a 401k that could possibly have a match, that, that's something that I don't get to benefit from. But I agree with you, Chris. There's not really, I'm one of those people that has like 30 different 1099s that come in every year. Oh, so they did clarify because we miss out on half of self-employment tax being paid by the employer and also no 401k match. Yes. So good.
Right.
I'm glad. That's what I was
But
guessing.
you'll get that back.
Yeah, right.
Tax it. Yeah. Right.
Right. And so I think that it's in the same boat as some employers, even though they're W-2, don't match, and don't have that available, or you don't know what that match is going to be until the end of the year and you can't plan for it and they change it. For me, it was really just getting in front of it and making sure that I was like, it was setting the goal and going, well, I don't want to be one of those people that you either there. I felt, and you could tell me what you think, Chris. For me, when I was talking to my advisor, I felt like there was that in between middle of the road squeeze. So it's okay if you make hardly any money, and it's okay if you make a whole bunch. So I was trying to figure out. I'm like, I need to jump this section.
Yeah.
And where I feel like I'm like overtaxed for the amount of money that I have. So I felt like I needed to like get higher into that so I wouldn't feel it as much, because I'm like, well, I'm used to living on this. So even if I have to make up some of that in taxes, my cost, my lifestyle will still be taken care of.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I don't want to jump over this too quickly, Shannon, just in case, because I have had clients that were confused about this, that, the comment about, the part that the employer pays for Social Security and Medicare, that is a business expense. So I did have a client once that didn't know that and wasn't putting that on their as part of their business expenses to get returned through their tax return. So you can do that. I don't know if that was the confusion, but maybe not, but just wanted to make sure I said that because I did have a client once that didn't know that. To your point, Shannon, and maybe this goes a little bit back to the automating thing too, is make sure when you're a 1099 employee that you're paying your tax quarterly, because that gets very tricky if you wait till the end of the year. And then, especially if you make more money than you expected to, you might even get a penalty if you wait till the end of the year to kind of have it all trued up, because you could get a big tax bill because you haven't paid quarterly all throughout the year. And if you underpay by too much, you'll get a penalty, which is pretty onerous. So make sure you keep up with that.
And it's once I got to that point, I had to hire somebody to start doing it. Like I was doing my taxes myself until I got to a certain level. I'm like, trying to make sure that I'm in front of this quarterly. It was worth the having somebody help me do that, as a solopreneur, because it was, like you said, tricky was a great word. This next question, we get to, and again, thank you for clarifying that. I do think it's also a value for a person that was talking about their 1099. If you don't have a financial advisor right now, I do it has been a game changer for me to have somebody now that helps me keep track of that. So before we wrap and we say our final points, how about this one? How/where to decide how to split and invest your money in a 401 or 403. And so they had these choices. They brought up Vanguard or Fidelity options, for instance.
Okay. Really, there's no difference. Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab, those kinds of companies are all very good at what they do. They all offer low cost index funds, which is what you'd want to consider first as you're starting to invest. I personally like Vanguard because I think they have a lot of great, wonderful low cost options, and they almost everything they offer is low cost because that's how they built the company. But all of those brokerage companies that were mentioned have good options that you can find to invest in. So I don't think there's any really need to pick one from another. 401k, 403b, you can only contribute the max to each of those plans collectively, if you know what I mean. So this year, 23,000 is the max. I forget if that's the over 50, under 50, but you get what I mean. Whatever the max is for the year that you can contribute to a 401k. If you then also have a 403b, it's still collectively 23,000. It's not, you can't put 23 in one, 23 in another. The difference is a 457. So like my husband has a 457 because he works for the government. You can contribute 23 to a 401k and 23 to a 457 if you were in a situation to work for two companies or two organizations that each have those plans, which is crazy to me, but that for some reason is allowed, but it's not allowed between other
things.
plans.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was part of the question there.
No, I think that that's fantastic. And as we start to wrap up today, we want to remind everybody, as you can see, Chris has up their slide about how you can get this free financial help and continue to ask these questions over at Savvy Ladies. I also want to remind people, since we are talking about generational wealth, that looking at it from that perspective and being able to make these decisions from a position of abundance. And I just want to, before we close, remind people that some of the conversations and the reason why we said from a perspective of generational wealth, and when Chris was talking about life insurance and getting these policies, we understand that a lot of times when you start talking about what you're doing in retirement or making these plans for what'll happen after you pass, it's very easy to drop into the land of it's depressing to think about what's going to happen to my money because I'm dead. And I like to instead go, we're not saying it from a position of, oh, it's sad to talk about death and passing. We get that there are very serious implications about that and why it might be emotionally triggering for people. What we're saying instead is having these conversations now about what are my wishes? What do I want my money to do? How do I want to take care of my family? That's reason, well, we've seen from Prince to Aretha Franklin, how it doesn't serve your family for you not to take care of these things for yourself, to write down your healthcare initiatives, to go ahead and fill out your will. I found it very freeing, and I'm a little on the, like, even my attorney was like, hey, good on you. The fact that I was young enough that go, I'm just going to write it out now. Because I don't want my sisters, who right now are listed as the caretakers for my son, if I were to pass early, I didn't want them to have a bunch of things that they had to worry about. I just wanted to take care of it so that they can worry about, they're already going to be grieving me and doing all of this stuff. I don't want them to have to worry about it. So if you can look at it from that perspective of, you are giving a gift to people instead of going, oh, it's depressing to think about the fact that I'm fragile as a human being, and life is always eventually going to come to an end. Accepting that impermanence and figuring out a way that you can use it for making positive life choices is great. So hopefully we answered all of the questions that we have. Anything else that you want to close on today, Chris?
The only thing I wanted to say, Shannon, was kind of jump on what you said about having a financial advisor. And I hope I don't sound self-serving, because obviously you'd go to other people. but it is important to make sure that when you engage with a financial advisor that they're a fiduciary.
Yes.
So, CFP, that certification I have, is a fiduciary certification. There are some others like that. It's just the same type of standard that an attorney has and a doctor has. They have to act in your best interest only.
Mm-hmm.
So you could go to somebody that is allowed to call themselves a financial advisor, and they're held to what's called a suitability standard, which just means that if they were to say you need life insurance, and it were to go to the life insurance company would say, you're offering that to an 80-year-old, person with no family. That's not suitable, right? So that's the standard they're held to. Not, they can do anything not in your best interest. They can sell you things to make money for themselves. And I'm not saying everyone would do that. So please, I hope nobody takes it that way. I'm just saying, if you go to a CFP person with that credential, you're going to get a fiduciary. So just, that's my one thing to say.
And then we can also wrap on this one. And Judy, if you want to come off mute and work on this one as well. Financial advisors usually charge based on a percent of assets. And they put in parentheses, so we can know how to budget that into our future. And it really depends. Like, you do need to work with different ones. So the fee strategy, some are per what you're working with them. So they might be paying that way. Sometimes it's based upon, even like Chris and some other fiduciaries, it might be based upon a fee in the, you go ahead and explain it, Chris, because I'm going to say it poorly, but it's not always out of your pocket is what I'm talking about. It might be based upon the situations that they're putting you in, right?
Yeah. So So if you go to work with a financial advisor, a lot of times they want to charge a percent of assets.
Mhm.
And it's generally 1% of your assets. That is a very costly model, I think, especially for someone that isn't in the multi-million-dollar realm. A person that's a CFP should also be available to charge a fee, a
Mhm.
flat fee. That's how I do my business. You charge a flat fee to put together a financial plan for a person to help them develop their goals, figure out what their future is going to be. And you can find folks that do that. And they will just charge the one flat fee. And then, but it's a little bit of a do it yourself also. So then you have to be somewhat comfortable with, okay, they're going to set me up with what I'm going to invest in, and then I'm going to feel comfortable maintaining that. Or many times what the advisor will do, you could keep coming back to them and paying them again a flat fee just to refresh the plan, which will be less money, that sort of thing. It's
Right.
a less costly way to do it. It's a little harder to find folks that do that because it's not as lucrative for them, but
And don't some also you get paid based upon what the plan is that they're working with, so the fee is included in basically the transaction type.
oh, I don't know of a lot of that, Shannon. I guess it could happen,
Mhm.
but either way, but the reason I personally don't care for that is then they're taking money out of your investments. You know, that you are invested. It's hard to get money into a qualified plan like a 401k or an IRA.
Mhm.
It's hard to do that. So for someone to think that someone's going to cash you out a part of that to pay themselves, that's why I don't like it. I'd rather someone save up the money, part of their goals, and then I'm going to pay this financial planner a flat fee to put together a plan for me, or maybe they'd even put it on a payment plan. You never know. It's
Mhm.
always pays to ask.
Yeah, and it always I think it's finding someone that communicates with you the way that you need to be
Yes.
communicated with, and then all of that stuff should be upfront on how they actually
Yes.
get paid.
They have to.
Mhm.
Required.
Right.
And I think that is the key, and a great time to wrap up is it's so important to ask the questions. So while you're asking them here on for this session about fees, as you are exploring, and the CFP has a board. So there is a CFP website that you can go and search to find a CFP, and you can search by your zip code. You can interview them, and everyone should interview them. And you can ask them how they want to be, do they do payment?
Right.
You can also negotiate with them as well. So when they say 1%, you can ask them and see where they come back to you. So always, just like you can negotiate a bill sometimes, and you can ask the Verizon or the car or the phone company
Mhm.
that you were late, can they deduct this late fee from you? Ask the question. So
Right.
I'm going to wrap it up that it is the power of the ask. It is so important. I really believe in that. That's why it is our mantra right now, and we're carrying it through because it is so true. Be comfortable in asking the question.
Mhm.
So thank you,
Wonderful.
everyone. Thank you.
Yes.
This was absolutely fantastic. You guys are amazing. Chris, thank you so much for jumping in today. Shannon, it's always a pleasure. You are fabulous. Great, great conversation today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this program. Have a great
Absolutely.
day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.